How far would you go on a violent personal crusade? How far would you go to help a friend? These are the questions faced by the protagonists of Memoria, Daedalic's new point-and-click adventure game. Hi, this is Ivey from JustAdventure.com, and you're watching me on my crappy little webcam. No, seriously, I'm really much better looking than this. Anyhow, I'm brand new to making web videos, and I really don't know what I'm doing. For example, I'm breaking the very first rule of costume in that I'm wearing white. What can I say? I just don't know any better. Anyhow, back to our game. Memoria tells two stories. The first is about Saja, a fierce and beautiful young exile on a quest to find an ancient and powerful artifact. The second is about Garen, a young bird catcher who's seeking the answer to a vexing riddle. Saja needs the artifact to enter into an epic battle with demons. Garen simply wants to rescue a friend from a magical transformation that has turned her into a raven. Both stories employ the classic storytelling technique of in medias res, or starting the narrative right in the middle of the story. This works well for Saja's story. For Garen's story, not so much. More on that in a minute. The first section of the game is Saja's, and it's all very Indiana Jones. I mean that pretty literally, as the action takes place in a dangerous ancient tomb which theoretically contains a powerful mask that our heroine is determined to find. It doesn't matter that you're joining things in the middle of a story like this because it's easy to catch up. We're in a creepy old tomb, it's dangerous and puzzly, and we need to find something. We've been to the movies, we know the drill. In this section, the puzzles are fun, and you get to meet an entertaining sidekick, a mysterious entity who's somehow been trapped into a large magical staff. After the adventure in the cave, the action switches to Garen's story, which takes place hundreds of years later in the city of Andergast. So this Garen guy's talking to a bird. Really? Yeah, a bird. It seems his friend, a fairy named Nuri, has been transformed into a bird somehow, and Garen is trying to get the spell lifted off of her. Another character has pledged to help him with this if he solves a mysterious riddle. After a few minutes of this and a bunch of other references to things I didn't get, I began to get a bit puzzled and then irritated. There was clearly a lot of backstory here, and the game was proceeding along as if I understood what it was all about. Then it hit me. So it turns out Memoria is a continuation of the story begun in Daedalic's game, The Chains of Satanoth. Now, I knew that the game was based on The Dark Eye, and if that doesn't ring a bell for you, The Dark Eye is a really popular role-playing franchise from Germany. How popular? Well, in Germany it outsells D&D. Plus, it's had a lot of spin-offs, games, card games, novels, and of course, video games. The Drakensang games, and maybe you remember the Realms of Arcania games from the early 90s? Anyway, what I didn't realize was that Memoria is a very linear sequel to their earlier game, The Chains of Satanoth, which is a game I haven't played. And unlike many game sequels, Memoria doesn't do much to get you up to speed on what's going on with Garen and Nuri. She's a bird. Why is she a bird? Blah, blah, blah. You're supposed to know. I don't know. You just have to sort of catch up. It's a shame Daedalic didn't just call this one Chains of Satanoth 2 Memoria or some such. But perhaps they wanted to make sure they included that valuable Dark Eye label, and maybe they decided The Dark Eye, Memoria, Chains of Satanoth 2 was just a bit too cumbersome. Now, of course, I don't mind sequels. I just like to know when a game is a sequel, and I prefer to understand the context of the story in a story-driven game, even if that game is a sequel. Besides, shouldn't every game be able to stand on its own? Now, I know what you may be thinking. Hang on, wait just a minute. Wasn't that almost universally loved game Siberia essentially a single story split over two games? Well, yeah, it was. And let's see, what was the name of the second game in the Siberia series? Oh yeah, Siberia 2. Not too much room for confusion there. Now, I don't want to make too big a thing of this, but I do recommend that, unlike me, you play The Chains of Satanoth before you play Memoria. And this shouldn't be a big problem because, review spoiler alert, Memoria is a good game. And I imagine that The Chains of Satanoth is a good game too. The game consists of 8 chapters, and the gameplay bounces back and forth between the 2 stories at set intervals. Both stories are engaging, and the dual aspect of the game helps keep things fresh. Also, this being a Daedalic game, the art is absolutely lovely. If you're like me, and really, who isn't? It's difficult to resist the hand watercolored look of the many gorgeous environments. And while the art is consistently good, the animations aren't. Sometimes they're fluid and lovely, and sometimes they're jarringly primitive and Clutch Cargo-like. Okay, I've really aged myself with that reference.
Clutch Cargo with his pals Spinner and Paddlefoot in another exciting adventure, Pirate Isle.
I'm not sure if this happened because of different production teams working on different parts of the game, or if it was a stylistic or a budget decision, but it's odd and it's noticeable. Puzzle-wise, I divide the game in half. For the first 4 chapters, the puzzles are logical and fair. I had a lot of fun solving them. Starting in chapter 5, though, the puzzles became more complex and, for me at least, less intuitive and, dare I say it, sometimes obtuse. But then, I'm probably just not that good at those kinds of puzzles. Near the end of the game, there's a cascade of conundrums that really had me in fits. You're making your way through this huge series of caverns and hallways and having to activate and deactivate crystals and lift bridges and lower bridges, and let's just say you're going to need all of your patience for that chapter. At least I did. Now, if you've followed my reviews of Daedalic games over the past few years, you may remember that I can be kind of hard on them regarding what I consider to be the middling level of quality of their English localizations. And while they have gotten better, there's some pretty good voice acting in this game, actually. There's still some room for improvement. Sometimes the lazy translations and poor voice acting combine to create cringeworthy moments of leaden humor. A great example of this is late in the game when 2 children are arguing, and one of them replies to a taunt with, "That's humorous." Now, it's not like there was a great joke there or anything. It's your basic, oh, haha, it is to laugh type thing. But it's so poorly translated and executed that it really calls attention to itself, and it becomes reminiscent of, I don't know, the 7th grade class play, and not in a good way. It's like the scene collapses to the ground like a clown someone's let the air out of. However, these are problems that aren't too hard to overlook considering the game's other significant strengths. 2 good stories, terrific graphics, mostly decent voice acting, and puzzles that are fun if sometimes a little bit obtuse. And speaking of the stories, not to spoil anything, but let me just point out that both of the stories have very excellent conclusions in which much that has come before pays off in very satisfying ways. This is good writing. In one of the stories, you even get to make a very meaningful choice. This, again, is a good thing. In fact, the consequences of that choice were so resonant to me that it became the most memorable thing that I took away from this game. In conclusion, play this game. But you might want to play Chains of Satanas first. Grade? A strong B+. Thanks for watching, and look for more video reviews soon on justadventure.com.